Good morning, Dan and Amy.
Thanks for filling out the bracket.
Oh, yeah, for your 5th and 6th grade girls
Basketball
tournament.
playoffs, yeah.
You're already to the Final Four.
Yeah.
Because there's 4 teams that you started with.
No, there's 8.
Oh.
Okay. And you have Burley beating Blaine 47 to nothing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's like a super fan score.
Oh, yeah. They can't full court press the whole time, just the last 2 minutes of each half. So thanks, Dan.
It's not the way I play the game. It's 40 minutes of hell if I'm the coach. Or how many minutes do you have? More like 24 minutes? Or...
2 16-minute halves.
No, 32 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, not bad.
Well, look at you do the math.
Thank you very much. It's the Catholic School Education. Hey, we're going to talk to Steve Cortes, Fox News contributor, former Trump surrogate. One of the things he wanted to talk about, though, he picked up the story that we mentioned briefly yesterday, but it's worth repeating. This is the 45th Ward Alderman John Arena, who doesn't particularly care for people who disagree with him or for Trump voters. Of Trump voters, John Arena said, this is social media, they're just pulling his Facebook posts.
Yeah, he did this to himself, folks.
Quote, I am not ready to cede, misspelled, this country to the racist, classist, knuckle-dragging, and generally subhuman puddle of DNA that makes up the base of President Donald Trump supporters. We have made too much progress since scrubbing the George Bush idiocy from the Oval Office. So there you go. If you're a Trump voter, racist, classist, knuckle-dragging, generally subhuman puddle of DNA. That's you. So make sure you understand that. But hey,
hey, how do you really feel?
Those folks on the Northwest Side, you keep going with John Arena. He also said of Indiana, people, saying I'm going to move to Indiana because I can't afford to live here and I don't get much bang for my buck. Go ahead, move to Indiana and live in a third world economy. S blank itty schools and low wages. And read a newspaper or something. Rail against everything but offer no ideas and think only of yourself. Time to grow up and be part of society. Be selfless, like
him.
A Chicago alderman is.
I'm surprised he hasn't gotten popped. Seriously, I'm not just spat on or punched in the face.
Well, and also he is the spearheading a major Section 8 development, low-income housing development in the Jefferson Park, Portage Park areas. And as Russ Stewart, who's no real conservative, but is a longtime political analyst, he describes Arena's plan as colonization. The mathematics are elemental, packing 3,000 mostly Democrat tenants into a ward voter pool, and Arena goes from shaky in terms of his reelection to secure. Low-income renters are more liberal than homeowners, have no long-term commitment to the community, care not a whit about property taxes, as many have Section 8 subsidies, and are future Arena voters. Russ Stewart's exactly right. That analysis is spot on. And what do we know from just survey research? You want to turn somebody into a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, put them on the dole. Mm-hmm. You make somebody dependent, you turn them into a reliable vote for big government on which they're dependent, and for even the most vicious political hacks like John Arena.
Well, he's just, the name slinging, it's just insulting. We're all Americans, and you don't rip on people. In the state next to us, it's been pretty successful. U.S. News and World Report has Indiana the best governed state in the nation, and Illinois not even on the list because we've been downgraded from a state to a territory. But whose territory? Nobody wants us.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid Steve Cortes, a newly minted Fox News contributor. You're welcome for us getting that for you, Steve. Thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning, Dan and Amy.
So I know before we get to some of the national policy matters, you wanted to weigh in on what Alderman Arena had to say as a Chicago resident yourself.
Yes, our august alderman. I live in the ward right next to his. I'm thinking that I should move a few blocks over and try to run against him because it's so.
Get a Section 8 voucher if you do.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I'll get into one of his subsidized houses. By the way, his tactic there reminds me that's a much smaller scale version of what I think the Democrats were trying to do, by the way, in this election regarding illegal immigrants. I think one of the reasons they wanted amnesty is they wanted 10 million new Democratic voters. So I think it wasn't out of the kindness of their hearts that they wanted to give amnesty. But in any case, back to Alderman Arena, it's so insulting that we pay taxes for this man so that he can then turn around and call people like me a subhuman puddle of DNA. I mean, I guess I've been called worse, but I can't remember it, to be quite honest.
But when do you think the insults are going to stop? I mean, when do you think the left is going to get over the fact that Trump won, whether they like it or not?
You know, they don't seem capable of it. I think what honestly happened to a lot of people on the left, probably with John Areno, though I don't know him, a lot of them turned government into their god. They truly did. And there was a religious devotion to the state, which I think is sad and pathetic, but I think that's the reality. And so when we won, and when we won on a platform of dismantling the deep state or dismantling the administrative state in Washington, D.C., they really can't deal with it, almost on a religious sense. I mean, because we really did destroy, in some ways, their deity of the state. And so I think that that's part of why they're reacting the way they do. But that doesn't excuse the reaction, of course, and particularly for somebody like John Arena, who is paid for by the taxpayers. You know, between him saying this a couple days ago, at least that's when I read it, and then yesterday, Luis Gutierrez having to be arrested and escorted out of the federal building in handcuffs. Our Chicago politicians, the people we pay who are supposed to serve us, are pretty embarrassing, to be quite frank.
I want Luis Gutierrez escorted into the federal building in handcuffs. That will be a happy day.
Right.
And by the way, that's the least of his crimes. Yesterday, his real crime is his voting record. But on that topic, and the topic you mentioned before about amnesty and voting blocks, it's interesting because we've had this voter fraud discussion going on for a couple of months now. And Washington Examiner reporting yesterday, dozens of 17-year-olds voted illegally in the 2016 Wisconsin primary, according to a new state report by the Wisconsin Elections Commission. The individuals incorrectly thought they could cast ballots in the primary if they turned 18 before the November general election. So, so they've got about 60 cases of 17-year-olds voting in the April 2016 primary spread across 29 counties in Wisconsin. So when we talk about voter fraud, I just raise this example because people always say, oh, you know, you're demagoguing Latinos or people here illegally or not trying. No, we're just saying, look, if you don't, it could be a 17-year-old that innocently and mistakenly thinks they can vote and they can't, and you don't have the proper safeguards to ensure that somebody who's administering the election at the polling place in question prevents them from voting and explains to them the law. It's all of these examples, but, 60 examples of that in Wisconsin, that takes 60 votes away from 60 people in Wisconsin who do have the franchise. Their votes are canceled because of voter fraud. And so it doesn't matter if it's white 17-year-olds in Wisconsin or Latinos or Creamy Bob and his gang of Guevaraists trying to commit voter fraud purposefully. It's just the idea of why can't we investigate this? We've done stories, too, in the papers that I run, found instances of duplicate registrations on Illinois voter rolls and the possibility that a number of people voted twice in the 2014 election. We're still looking at 16. So why can't we just have an honest conversation about preventing this kind of fraud, innocent or not innocent?
Right. Well, and it's a typical tactic of the left, though, right? Is that we're not even going to discuss this, and the way we're going to shut down conversation is we're going to call you a racist. It's almost just their default position anytime they really don't agree with you, or I think anytime they think you're going to win on an issue. I don't think voter fraud is systemic. I don't. And I think that President Trump is mistaken to make too big a deal of it. However, clearly it exists. I mean, we live in the real world. We know that people either, out of misunderstanding or out of nefarious motivations, are voting illegally. We have 40 million non-citizens in the United States, both legal and illegal, so green card holders and illegals. To allege that none of them, or even say if it's 5% of them, that's a couple of million people who are voting illegally. It's certainly worth looking into. Does it exist? I'm sure it does. Again, is it systemic? No, I don't believe that, and I think Trump pays a little too much attention to it. But I would also say this, as an Hispanic, the idea that and we hear this all the time from the left, that voter ID is somehow racist. How racist is that notion? I mean, the idea that I can't get my self-identification and I can't get it to the polling place because I'm Hispanic, or because someone's African American. Like we can't figure that out, how to get a state ID or a passport or a driver's license. I mean, it's absurd. It's insulting.
So the CBO, just switching topics here, came out about their health care plan and said that, right now 14 million people will be uninsured, and in 10 years, 24 million people would be uninsured. Do you believe the CBO's report?
I certainly do not, and partly because their track record is so poor in the past, and also because when you want to project 10 years forward on something as complicated as this, I mean, I think you'd be better off projecting World Series winners 10 years forward. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to score, as they say, these things. And so I don't believe them. But look, are there going to be more people who are not, quote, covered? Yes. I think if you don't force people to do something that they don't want to do, a certain number of them won't do it going forward. So, I mean, to me, I almost don't care that number may tick up. What I do care about is access to healthcare, real access to healthcare. So just saying that you're covered when you don't have a usable plan because your deductibles are so high or because your doctor won't take your plan, just saying you're covered doesn't mean a whole lot. What matters is that when you need healthcare, you actually have access to it. And I think that this plan, while very imperfect, not the plan that I would write, I think this plan is going to greatly improve upon Obamacare. And I think more importantly, as a Trump guy, what I want is let's get this almost out of the way. Let's get this solved at least temporarily so that we can then get to what I think is really the holy grail, which is tax reform. And once we get to that, then I think we see this economy soar and people can afford health care and can afford all kinds of things in their life.
All right. He is Steve Cortes, Fox News contributor, former Donald Trump Hispanic Advisory Council head. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great day. Stay warm.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.